Hello, my friends, hello. And taking off one of my favorite quotes to read at the end of the day, I'll just change a little bit about it and say, I hope that you begin this new day in too high of a spirit to be encumbered by yesterday's old nonsense. May it be serene and filled with joy, my friends. I just thought it'd be nice to start off the week and the day and the month in a real positive place. I'm in a very positive place as I speak to you from the shed here in Rockland County, and I wanted to spread my cheer, my joy amongst you here during the darkest time of the year. I hope that you are finding yours, and while you are probably suffering in a myriad of ways and trying to overcome this obstacle or that stress or anxiety, I am very happy to have you here to navigate through all of it, learn about the issues that are happening in the world, in your town, in your spirit. That's what we do here at Stand Up, and I've got a great guest joining me today. Maura Quint often joins me on Mondays, but if you ever skip my discussions with her, don't make today be the one to skip. It's real good, real deep, thoughtful, and hilarious as always. I got her reactions to the death of Henry Kissinger and Sandra Day O'Connor. We talked about Elon Musk and George Santos, of course, but we had a really deep and thoughtful conversation about gender confusion, jumping off of a great column by Lydia Polgreen in the New York Times that Maura shared with her massive following. We also talked about what it's like to be the diplomat in your family or even a mediator in other people's relationships, and why Maura is real good and would be very good at that. And I even tried to pimp her out as a mediator for your marriage. That's coming up, as well as another interesting conversation that we had about why it matters to elect people who are persuadable, have people represent us that are persuadable with our initiatives and our agendas. It's a great conversation with Maura today, and I really encourage you to listen to this one. And if you don't like it, I will personally call you and apologize to you for raving so much about this one. And if you want to skip my non-award-winning but really comprehensive, robust, thoughtful, and at times even funny news recap to get to my conversation with Maura, it begins at 26 minutes in today. But for those of you that want to stay here and find out what happened over the weekend, according to me, based on stories I think are most important, impactful, and what's coming up on the week. First and foremost, worth getting an update on what's happening in the Middle East. Israel pounded southern Gaza after U.S. warned on civilian deaths, is the headline at the Financial Times. Israel has ordered Palestinians in Gaza to evacuate a large area of land in the south of the Strip while stepping up an aerial bombardment that has killed hundreds of people since the fragile truce with Hamas broke down on Friday. Israeli attacks again against the Jabalia refugee camp. At least 15,500 Palestinians have been killed since the conflict began, and Palestinian sources saying 700 people have died over the last 24 hours. It is really hard to believe some of these numbers, not because of the sources necessarily, but just because it's been such a confusing and brutal conflict for so long. According to the latest data from the UN's Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the World Health Organization, and the Palestinian government, as of November 23rd, Israeli attacks have damaged more than half of Gaza's homes. In a related story back here at home, how is this affecting domestic politics? It's not the most important issue, especially a year away from the election, but it is something that obviously a lot of people are thinking about, caring about, and I'm not sure how much attention this deserves, but certainly plenty of media outlets are giving attention. Here's Politico. Swing state Muslim leaders launch campaign to, quote, abandon Biden in 2024. The bubbling anger among Arab and Muslim Americans over the president's handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict could threaten his chances of re-election, says Politico. I'm not so sure that is accurate, but nonetheless, Muslim leaders from several swing states this Saturday descended on Dearborn, Michigan to launch a national campaign against the re-election of President Joe Biden in response to his handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Hamas? Is that how it's said? All right, stop making fun of me. I hear you, Vicky. Organizers from Michigan, Minnesota, Arizona, Wisconsin, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania are calling the campaign hashtag abandon Biden, vowing to ensure that Biden is a one-term president. These leaders have run separate pressure campaigns in their respective states. Members of the coalition said, but they felt now is it's time to coordinate their response ahead of the 2024 election. I find this just absolutely idiotic, short-term thinking to get attention, maybe for their organizations or even themselves. And I may even reach out to one of these leaders and ask them to come on and defend this, although I don't know how much air I want to give this movement. Politico writes, it's unclear how expansive or successful the campaign will be, but its creation speaks of the mounting political pressure facing Biden amid the conflict in the Middle East. One of the members of the coalition, Jailani Hussein, says, we are not powerless as American Muslims. We are powerful. We don't only have the money, but we have the actual votes, and we will use that vote to save this nation from itself. What? And help Donald Trump get elected? They admit that they are not voting for Donald Trump next year, this coalition of Muslim Americans who were apparently supporting Biden. But were they ever? Though they recognize their effort to rally support against Biden could elevate the former president, they said they'll continue to have discussions as a community about which candidate to throw their support behind as the primaries rapidly approach. We're not supporting Trump. We're not going to make the same mistake of thinking about President Biden the way we thought. We don't have two options. We have many options, and we are going to exercise that. Okay, that is a tough one to take. Not a fan of that movement, but I may reach out to them and try to talk to them a little bit more about it. Maybe have one of those representatives join me. What do you think? standupwithpete@gmail.com. Let me know. Also in the region, 3 commercial ships were hit by missiles in the Red Sea, as well as a U.S. warship apparently was attacked by drones, but the USS Carney shot them all down. That's an American destroyer. The Associated Press reported ballistic missiles fired by Yemen's Houthi rebels struck 3 commercial ships Sunday in the Red Sea, while a U.S. warship shot down 3 drones in self-defense during the hours-long assault. The Iranian-backed Houthis claimed 2 of the attacks. In a related story to that, Navy sailors on the USS Carney said they had a fucking awesome day shooting down those drones. Yeah, I just made up that quote, but you know, when you're out there just mostly training every day of every hour for that kind of a thing, and you actually get to shoot at drones, they're probably pretty amped about that, let's be honest. And coming back here at home again, one of the 3 Palestinian college students who was shot while walking in Vermont over Thanksgiving weekend apparently is paralyzed from the chest down after a bullet became lodged in his spine, according to the mother of Hisham Awartani. His family has launched a GoFundMe fundraiser to help the 20-year-old junior at Brown University, scheduled to be released from the hospital next week to go on and receive rehabilitation, according to his mother in a statement to CNN. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you? Oh, in Moscow, apparently, police have now targeted multiple gay-friendly nightclubs and a men's sauna in what appeared to be simultaneous raids, local media outlets said Saturday. The headline at Barron's.com, Russian police raid gay bars in Moscow, media says. Russia had already outlawed LGBT propaganda, that's in quotes, among all adults last year, effectively banning representation of LGBTQ people in public and in the media. So those of you rooting for Russia, you're also rooting for that. I don't think anybody listening to me say that is rooting for Russia, but tell your friends. You probably have friends who are rooting for Russia. Tell them. All right, the big news out of the COP28 climate change meetings in Dubai, the headline that oil companies are pledging to combat methane. Environmentalists, of course, call it a smokescreen, but 50 oil companies are pledging to reach near zero methane emissions and end routine flaring by their operations by 2030, according to the president of this year's United Nations climate talks on Saturday. Many environmental groups were quick to criticize this, quote, the pledge is a smokescreen to hide the reality that we need to phase out oil, gas, and coal, said a letter signed by more than 300 civil society groups. Got some sound from former Senator Jon Carroll, who is the, I think, climate czar, and representing the U.S. there. I think the vice president's on her way to Dubai as well. The Energy Justice Director at the Center for Biological Diversity said of this scheme, the commitments to cut methane are significant, but they address the symptom, not the source. And the Environmental Defense Fund president said Saturday's deal, quote, could be the single most impactful day of announcement from any COP in my 30 years at the Environmental Defense Fund. So a little bit of a different take from him. Methane, of course, has caused about half of the world's warming since pre-industrial times. However, methane escaping from oil and gas drilling is only about 23% of the world's methane emissions, with agriculture and waste being bigger culprits. According to scientists who calculated that the proposal would trim 1/10 of a degree from future warning. Be significant, but not a fundamental contribution to making average temperatures not rise beyond 1.5 degrees. All right, but still, big news. I'm going to hopefully be talking to Emily Atkin from Heated about that later today, so look forward to that. And one more headline before I get to some sound for you. Olympic gold medalist swimmer Quint Keller has been sentenced to 36 months of probation for his role in the Capitol riot. Federal prosecutors had recommended 10 months in prison, but he's going to be getting probation instead, avoiding prison time after pleading guilty to a federal felony. The two-time gold medalist was one of the first January 6th riot defendants to plead guilty to a felony. He was seen in videos wearing a Team USA jacket in the Capitol Rotunda, surrounded by other members of the pro-Donald mob. He also was wearing his gold medal and name tag that said Quint Keller. All right, I exaggerated a little bit, but I mean, he's wearing his Olympic jacket. Anyway, he broke into the Capitol, and now he's going to be punished for it. Good. All right, those are your headlines. Now, let's get to a few audio clips I've gathered for you on today's program. And a reminder, this segment is sponsored by you, the paying subscriber of this show. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic to sign up now if you haven't already. All right, what do I got for you here audio-wise from the weekend programs that I scanned for you so that you didn't have to? A lot of traction being given to CNN's State of the Union segment with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Well, I'll let you listen and decide what you think about this. I think all the context is there. They are talking specifically about Hamas's mass rape of women on October 7th.
I want to ask you about sexual violence. And it's kind of remarkable that this issue hasn't gotten enough attention globally. Widespread use of rape, brutal rape, sexual violence against Israeli women by Hamas. I've seen a lot of progressive women, generally speaking, they're quick to defend women's rights and speak out against using rape as a weapon of war, but downright silent on what we saw on October 7th and what might be happening inside Gaza right now to these hostages. Why is that?
I mean, I don't know that that's true. I think we always talk about the impact of war on women in particular. In fact, I remember 20 years ago, I did a petition around the war in Iraq.
Have you talked about it since October 7th?
Absolutely. And I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
specifically
all of
women?
the actions. Absolutely. The rape, of course. But I think we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours. And if they do not comply with international humanitarian law, they are bringing themselves to a place that makes it much more difficult strategically for them to be able to build the kinds of allies, to keep public opinion with them. And frankly, morally, I think we cannot say that one war crime deserves another. That is not what international humanitarian law says.
Okay, with respect, I was just asking about the women, and you turned it back to Israel. I'm asking you about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that rape is horrific, sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. Mm-hmm. However, I think we have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians. 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping
well, Dana,
Palestinian
I think
women.
we're not.
Okay, well, there it is. That was the controversial back and forth on CNN, and a lot of people had a lot of criticism for the congresswoman there for what they thought was a kind of equivocation, I guess. I actually wasn't as outraged as some of the headlines and comments about it. Once I listened to that back and forth, I felt like she was clearly condemning Hamas overall and specifically for the sexual violence. And I don't know. What do you think? Am I missing something? How did she mishandle that? And how could it have been said differently, do you think? And will it matter? Does it matter? Now I'm going to play 7 seconds of Donald Trump, who gave a freewheeling, disjointed, gaffe-filled, air-filled, obviously filled with lies. Apparently, Fox News had to break in and fact check him, I think, in a speech in Iowa over the weekend. I'm going to play 7 seconds because in this clip, he clearly misspeaks, or maybe not, when he says, "We've been waging an all-out war on American democracy." Here it is.
But we've been waging an all-out war on American democracy. You look at what they've been doing.
We've been waging an all-out war on American democracy. So anti-Trumpers and progressives are having a lot of fun with that, of course. All right, I thought this was a good piece of sound from the House Minority Leader, the Democratic leader in the House. It's Hakeem Jeffries. He was in Manchester, New Hampshire, making a speech this past Friday, and I wanted to throw this minute of Hakeem Jeffries in. Oh, there he is, Hakeem Jeffries, up at the New Hampshire State Democratic Party's Eleanor Roosevelt dinner. I wonder if my friend Kathleen O'Donnell and the New Hampshire Democrats I got to meet back in October were there. I bet they were. Jeffries was the keynote speaker. Cool. All right, what else have I got for you? Well, I thought this was interesting and important. While I don't agree that ABC News journalists and so many others save these important pieces of information, journalism, for their books to profit from them, and I certainly don't like Bill Kristol, whose podcast Jonathan Carroll was on, nonetheless, this is news because Jonathan Carroll claims on this during this interview about his new book that Tucker Carlson revealed former President Donald Trump is, quote, far more radical on Ukraine than he lets on in public. He mentioned how he learned Trump had begun calling Tucker Carlson on a regular occasion after Russia's invasion of Ukraine to discuss foreign policy, which is just insane to think about. In a private conversation with Jonathan Carroll, Tucker Carlson apparently revealed that Trump agrees with the former Fox News host that Ukraine and the United States were to blame for the war and not Russia.
I had learned that Trump was having, at first I was told it was near daily conversations with Trump. So I called Tucker. I mean, you and I both, and he worked for you at one point. So, I back in those days, I mean, I've known him maybe even longer than you have. We've both known him for a long, long, long time. And I called him up just to see if this was true. And he acknowledged, yeah, we do talk regularly. He said it wasn't really every day. It was more like maybe once or twice a week. And I said, the person that told me this thought he was kind of lonely. That's why he was talking to you. And he said, well, I don't know if it was really that. It was because it was most of these conversations, according to Tucker Carlson, were about foreign policy and specifically about Ukraine. He said the calls became much more regular after the invasion of Ukraine. And he said, Trump agrees with me far more than he lets on in public. He's far more radical on this than he lets on in public. As a matter of fact, he's basically the only person, classic kind of Tucker Carlson exaggeration perhaps, but not necessarily substantively wrong here, that nobody is more in sync with where he is on Russia and Ukraine than Donald Trump. And Tucker Carlson's position on Ukraine, which is basically that Ukraine's the aggressor he basically echoes what you see on Russian state television. And that's where Trump is, according to Tucker Carlson.
Well, there you have it. Jonathan Carroll talking about how often Tucker Carlson took phone calls from the then president, Donald Trump, on Ukraine, which, of course, he somehow sided against. How about this moment, fun moment on a CNN panel where Chris Wallace asked his panel what the chances are that President Biden will be impeached. Journalists Kristen Soltis-Anderson, Lulu Garcia-Navarro, Raihan Salam, and Kara Swisher were all on that panel. The Chris Wallace Show, Saturday morning.
There was talk about impeachment. It looks like that the House majority, Republicans, may vote to launch a formal impeachment inquiry next week. They've been doing it, but just without any official majority vote on the floor, because they think it'll put them in better stead in court when they try to subpoena Hunter or whomever. Let's assume that happens and they have the investigation. What do you think are the chances that this House will vote to impeach Joe Biden?
0.
Really?
0.
Why?
because it's a waste of time. They need to do it because they need to do it. But, you know, Hunter Biden is a tale as old as time. I'm old enough to remember Billy Carter. There's always been some presidential mess, and Trump's got a pile of them in his own family. I do think what Biden people should do is push back a little more of the dad who loves his kid, blind spot. Everybody has a kid like this. I think he's a liability. There's no question. He's got a drug problem. He had a drug problem. I think there's no win here, but it's not a win for the Republicans.
Reihan, what do you think of the chances that the House, in the end, and there's no question they'll do the inquiry, they'll find some way to get Hunter to testify, whether it's in closed deposition or in public. What are the chances that Joe Biden will be impeached?
I agree with Kara, basically, and the real
well, don't say
thing,
it with such pain in your face.
Well, look, the thing that really pains me, honestly, Chris, is that Republicans should be focusing on investigating the Biden administration for its posture towards Iran. That is something I would love to see, and they've been completely asleep at the switch on that. Hunter, it's a joke.
All right. A subject to be discussed later. Iran. When we come back, we'll discuss.
All right, Chris Wallace seemingly having no idea what Reihan Salam was referring to vis-a-vis investigating the Biden administration over Iran. Not sure either. So we both pay a lot of attention. I guess we'll probably find out soon about this actual legitimate scandal that joke Reihan Salam is going to point out. I never really taken that guy seriously. Sorry. And now let's head over to Dubai, where we find the Biden administration's climate envoy, I said czar earlier, Jon Carroll, at COP28, telling the United Nations participants that he's becoming more and more, quote, militant about climate policy and that no coal power plants should be permitted anywhere in the world anymore. Take it away, boss, with your wonky audio, but still very important comments from the guy who lost to George W. Bush.
And coal is about PM 2.5. When you measure the PM 2.5, it's double for coal. Now, we don't need that necessarily to tell us we ought to be transitioning out of coal. There shouldn't be any more coal-fired power plants permitted anywhere in the world. That's how you can do something for health. And the reality is that we're not doing it. So, the measure here is really sounding the alarm bell. I find myself getting more and more militant because I do not understand how adults who are in position of responsibility can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis.
Bravo, Jon Carroll. It sounded like he farted, that there was a fart right there at the end. Let me see if I can grab that audio and listen.
People on a daily basis.
Did you hear it? Talk about greenhouse gases, Jon Carroll. All right, now let's just end here with a laugh before we get to my conversation with the great Maura Quint, which is so good. Here it is from Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update. The boys were back. Colin Jost and Michael Che with a few of my favorite jokes from Weekend Update.
Well, this week we said goodbye to a former First Lady, a former Secretary of State, and the Supreme Court's first female justice, and also a guy who claims to be all three of those things.
George Santos.
Former Representative George Santos, seen here swallowing evidence, was expelled from Congress on Friday by a vote of 114 Shantae you stays to 311 sachet away.
Melania Trump made a rare public appearance when she attended the funeral of former First Lady Rosalynn Carter, who died at the age of 96. Melania said that she was deeply saddened to be reminded that your partner can live that long. Elon Musk met with Benjamin Netanyahu this week and agreed that Israel must destroy Hamas. And I think Musk could destroy Hamas almost instantly by becoming their CEO.
I like that. What?
During an interview, Elon Musk, who looked like the ghost of a guy who died in a 1950s drag race, was asked if he was anti-Semitic and said that he was, in fact, philo-Semitic. You know, another answer would be no. First Lady Jill Biden also unveiled a new ice rink near the White House, setting the stage for next week's headline, President Shatters Pelvis on Ice Rink.
In her new book, Liz Cheney claims that one Republican called Donald Trump Orange Jesus But it's like you always say, Colin, there's only one Jesus, and he's white. You know how you always say that?
Yeah, I always say that. I was in confidence. Disney announced that they'll be making 2 more sequels to Frozen. But by the time they come out, the only thing frozen will be Elsa's eggs.
Oh! Good stuff.
She wants a career.
All right, there you go. Colin Jost, Michael Che, and their writers at Saturday Night Live. Now it's time to get to my conversation with Maura Quint, as promised. Follow her on Blue Sky. If you don't have a Blue Sky code and you want one, you can get one from me or her. I know have at least one, and people have requested them over and over. I've given out like 15. She probably has a few. I know Christian Finnegan has a few. A lot of people are still trying out that social media platform. Also, she is on TikTok and Threads, and of course is the campaign chair for Americans for Tax Fairness and the co-creator of Tax March. We have a great conversation, as I told you earlier. Let's do it with the brilliant, hilarious, and always thoughtful, thought-provoking Maura Quint.
You asked for her, and she is back. I missed you for a week, and someone was like, is everything all right with you and Maura? I was like, I think. So.
I'm glad they picked up on it. I'm sorry you haven't, but it's nice someone's paying attention.
You've been sending me the weirdest signals.
By just not talking to you ever. Yeah, well, I know. That has seemed weird for you.
Yeah, well, that and every third text I send you, you just send me a middle finger back. So I guess
not always. There's a skull sometimes.
Maybe there's a rift. No, we did go for a bit for not talking, actually, though. But I felt like that was very Thanksgiving. And you shut it down, and you were with your family and friends and stuff. And I certainly was. How was it? It's always a big deal. So how was your Thanksgiving? Did you have fun?
Yeah, it was good. You know what? I've always said we have a big sort of traditional American Thanksgiving with football and all of that. And it's a big deal for me. It's the only holiday that I feel like I can say that about. But this year we had the added incredibly traditional element of having a big family fight. So that was fun.
Ooh,
that was fun.
What do you got? Can you say anything about anything?
Oh no. Cause it's not there's nothing to say. It's not as though it was I hate this politician and you love this politician. It was nothing clean like that. It was what if someone just hit the limit of years of frustration that they've never voiced, and a small thing just sets them off, and they just, I don't want to talk to him anymore. I'll be here and I am not going to ruin Thanksgiving, but I don't want to talk to him anymore,
Oh,
and
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it was good. We hadn't had that, and that is a big Thanksgiving thing, I feel like I was missing out on one of those classic things. Yeah.
Can I just ask, if you weren't one of the primary people involved, how were you? How do you behave in that situation? Do you take a passive role, a leadership role, a support role? Do you switch as I do? Well, usually I'm the one causing the problem, but do you maybe switch the subject?
So it depends on who's involved. And in this case, I felt that I was the only one who could intervene.
Okay.
So I jumped right in the middle and tried to divert all of the tried to get the one person some space, tried to take on all of the energy of the other person, tried to navigate and keep these two apart and get the right people around them, bring in the one person's wife,
wow.
Okay, can you you get him outside kind of thing, and you don't go outside, and we're going to talk about this. And
you are a real Scorsese, and I can see it. And I bet you did a great job.
It was, I did follow. That was some classic sort of childhood roles of that. That is where I acted as the, just the mediator, the person.
You get any shrapnel?
Not yet, but it could still be coming.
Yeah, there's a window. The window has not closed.
We're in the holiday season, man. This stuff carries through. You don't get a clean slate until the new year. So I don't know.
We really appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us, because everybody can relate, and it's fun to think about how you would be in that situation. And I'm wildly unsurprised that that's how it went. I'm sorry that happened, but you had a pretty good run.
Yeah, no, actually, it was pretty funny too, because it was real. we walked in the door and this was already happening and it was incredibly tense. Ooh. And I see it escalating. And that's when like, I just sort of jumped in and tried to deal and wound up in like a, very, I don't want to say like aggressive conversation, but a very like loud conversation in the garage, trying to like get one of the parties to understand that they needed to back off and like not do this anymore. And all of this is happening. Like, again, we just walked in the door and I had walked in the door with my kids. And I finally, get the sort of a more aggressive party to be like, all right, I won't go there anymore today. We won't talk about it. Got them to that place, which was like,
that person sounds super male.
You may note I was the only woman involved in any of this.
Oh, but, okay. All right.
Yeah. But so I got them to that place where it was like, all right, okay, everybody is like in agreement to just chill out for the rest of the night. I walk in the door and this head comes around the corner and it is my 12-year-old who just goes, did you get my text? And I look at my phone and he just texted, well, that escalated quickly. Like that was
very funny.
He's just
very
giggling
funny.
And ran away. Yeah.
Very funny of him to pick up and be self-aware and make that phrase, that joke. Now, are you available for private parties or other family functions?
I am actually. I kind of like this role. This is like it suits me, so I'll jump in. Sure.
You need to monetize that shit.
Invite me to your problematic family gathering. Absolutely.
You would be good. You would be good at like. I wish that people could just do marriage counseling or relationship counseling of any kind, professional, whatever. Just like as a little side role. Like, I don't know, like, because I would hire, like, I bet you we should try it. We should have some people from the community hire Maura for $200 an hour just to talk to them about their marriage or their business partnership. And because you're very good at that stuff. You're a good person to take in and then put out information. I've witnessed it.
Well, thank you. I do care about
But you don't have a degree, so you can't make any money doing it.
I know. And I looked into it because I actually do like doing it so much. And I was like, you know what? Maybe this is like a career path. I could make a little change here in midlife. And just the amount of degrees, like the amount of money that you need to go into the school. Like I would take the courses. I just don't have $80,000 to sink into this idea at the moment. And then like you additionally need a tremendous amount of time. What's the word? When you're not getting like interning kind of thing. Like, which like I not only do I not have the money to invest, I do not have the several years of my life to like not be making money either. So I was like,
but I don't.
Oh well.
I'm sure I'm going to get people that if they listen and they're therapists or social workers or counselors of any kind be offended by it. But I mean, you would be better than some people who do it for a living. I mean, it's not like you have to have a degree. I think if you met like a couple for 10 times and you had some background on them, you'd be good at that because you're smart and you're empathic and you're diplomatic and you're thoughtful and whatever. Like, but you still can't do it, I guess. Or maybe you can. Let's just do it. Let's just hire Maura.
I mean, I've done a lot of like sort of adjacent things to it, right? Like I've done a lot of training and I worked suicide hotlines and have been a suicide interventionist. And I've done a lot of then community-based trainings on intervention and on mediation. And so I've done like all these kind of things around the side of it, but I don't have the fancy degree. But that said, I'd be happy to do that. We could do like a listener call in here, you could take questions.
Okay. All right. Put a pin in that.
I'm sorry. I'm now going to make your show the thing I want to do. Is that all right? Can I just commandeer this whole deal?
Put a pin in that. I love it. Well, we were kind of working it out. I was obviously working it out on my own and also just talking about the actual issue of sometimes, a person without any formal education, although that is actually formal education, those kinds of workshops that you took. Mediation is mediation, but that we can't hire them. But you would be really good at it. And we should do at least like a call-in thing for sure. Done. All right. So let me ask you about, I know it was a rough week for you. I was surprised to see your reaction. But you were very disappointed when Henry Kissinger was pronounced dead. Why, Maura?
Well, I thought that he invented the Hershey's Kiss, and so I was really confused for a moment because I was like, "Oh, I like those. They're really cute. The chocolate's not great, but they're adorable. The shape. It took me a while to come back around on exactly what had happened. Yeah.
Then you realized that it was him.
I mean, I knew that he killed a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. Like I knew he was a war criminal. I just thought he did both. So it was just I had like a really mixed. Internal.
Right. People are complicated.
Yeah, exactly. We have to honor the good while also celebrating the bad.
You don't necessarily have to be the worst thing that you ever were. Like, people can rebuild, they can recover, they don't, they can.
Some people can. Yeah. Henry Kissinger, no, though he's just through and through, just burning in some idea of hell. Isn't that lovely?
Did you see any reactions that surprised you? Did you think much about him? Did you read much about his work, if you will?
He's one of those people that, like, you know, sometimes you do like internalize this dislike of someone, or you read something, or you learn something about, you know, a figure that makes you go, oh, that person's terrible and I don't like them. And then later you come across more in their biography and their life, and you go, oh, okay, well, all right, well, they also did some other good things. Maybe I shouldn't just fully write them off in this way. Or like you go, oh, I understand what made them that way. So maybe I still think they're terrible, but I have a little bit of empathy for their life story. And in this case, it's just like such a clean slate. It's just like, no matter what you learn, you're like, oh, he was even worse. He was even worse. That's amazing. It's incredible. What an absolutely vile human being.
Yeah,
the world's
and
a little bit better because he's not here.
Yeah. Yes. Well said. All well said. Now, we also lost this past week the first female to serve as U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor. And she was appointed by, I think, Ronald Reagan. She was on the court from 1981 to 2006. You're a feminist woman. You're a feministy woman. You're a woman that cares about and supports other women who are breaking glass ceilings and so on. Did you pour a little out for Sandra Day O'Connor? Did you think about that?
I did in like 2002 when I thought she died. I had no idea. None. I fully thought that woman was dead decades ago.
Okay. Well, moving on. Another prominent woman died. George Santos. Thoughts on his career and what goes on next for him, and the amount of attention that he has gotten, and what it says about the Republican Party that they expelled this guy and have other people that are arguably worse.
Much, much worse. It's fun. Like, what it tells me is basically he didn't make any of the right friends, right? He did not befriend any of the people he needed to befriend to stay in office, because everything he did was like totally fine with the Republican Party. They're psyched on all of that. He just didn't get anybody on his side. So he's just a wonderfully unlikable person. And he's terrible. And I am not going to be here and like redeem him in any way. But he is also such a messy bitch, and it is so fun. I'm so glad he's out. And I love his whole, I don't know if you saw, he did like there was a whole thread on Twitter or whatever. He started posting like, oh, okay, well, now that I'm out, we should look into this representative and that representative, and who's paying for this one. And I mean, that level of just petty takedown, I mean, I do appreciate, I gotta say.
Well, you know, I was about to push back seriously a little bit on that. Not everybody has lied as much as George Santos did about their biography, about the resume. But the truth actually is there was a time in our lifetime, and even we've been covering and talking about politics, this was the deal. If you lied about a degree you had or a place that you worked, it could, not always, but it very well could end at least your campaign, much less your career. But there are actually, as I was thinking that, several congressmen, I think Ryan Zinke comes to mind, and others who have lied about their military service, their education, their work history in pretty blatant ways. And I can't think of some others, but George Santos is certainly not the only one, Republican or Democrat.
No, not at all. And not only that, like, okay, he lied. I mean, look, he's terrible. Don't get me wrong. He stole money. He's a serial liar. There's something obviously like, and at the same time, there's so many of them that have been lying about so many things. They are doing incredibly shady stuff on the financial side. Like it's just a more sort of clear-cut example of things that so many of them are hiding and trying to get away with. That it's like, okay, you know, it's hard to think, oh gosh, they got the one guy. They did it. They found the one guy who was a problem and they kicked him out. Good for them. Right. I can't really get that enthusiasm there.
I want to ask you also, moving on from George Santos, although we may never be able to because he may remain in the news, just going on every network he can or any show he can, and just, he might even, who knows, maybe he'll just make up shit instead of spilling actual tea. He's
probably going to be a late night host in a bit, I would guess, a good place for him to be.
Yeah, he's going to certainly have some platform, whether it's YouTube or elsewhere. You ever think about how Ted Cruz does like a 3 times a week podcast, and how amazing and effective that must be for him, and how easy it must be to monetize if you're. It's such a really bad conflict of interest. Bernie Sanders used to do a regular radio spot on Thom Hartmann's show, and I can't think of anything else like this. It's such a weird, horrible conflict of interest that should not be allowed.
To have a radio show or to monetize a podcast?
Both. To have a media outlet like that, you could never regulate it. You could never make it illegal. I don't know. It just made me think about it. I think about that a lot, that he has got a very probably successful podcast.
I don't think I realized that he did. I can't imagine him speaking for any
There's
length
a whole
of
bit
time.
about how often he plugs it.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, at the most inopportune times. Let me ask you about Elon Musk this week. He was with Andrew Ross Sorkin, who he called by the wrong name, even though he said in that quote, everybody heard it, the only reason I'm here is because I'm friends with you, Daniel. He's like, I'm Andrew. But then he just kind of burnt it all down. He's like, fuck you to all the sponsors. Anybody that doesn't, you heard it. Everybody listening heard it. I don't think I need to explain it. But I wanted to get your reaction to what you thought that was as we watch Twitter continue to burn, a place where you built a huge following, very influential, and one of my favorite follows on Twitter. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's again, if we had any sort of ability to give a shit about Elon's inner life, it would be tremendously sad. It would be incredibly depressing the way he spends his time and the things he gets upset about. He's so mad. He's so hurt and upset that people that the people he wants to revere him are not revering him.
Yeah.
And it is like absolutely spiraling him out. And at the same time, my God, that kid, he's just like, every time I hear him say anything, the first instinct that it makes in me, outside of like just utter hatred, is, oh my God, that is a child that needs to be disciplined. Like someone just needs to send him to his room and take away his toys. Like he shouldn't be allowed on electronics for a week. You know what I mean? Like he just, he should have his allowance cut off, and until he turns his act around. Like there's just something that is so like needy and childish and spoiled about everything he does that it absolutely just instantly triggers in this like mom like feeling in me, not a nurturing, loving mom, a like not in my household kid kind of mom, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great, interesting, very accurate analysis that I'm sure you're not alone with, but you don't have that kind of passion for him. And so you actually can't do that.
I can't. And I'm also not his mother. And luckily, because that would be a really, really depressing life.
I wonder if is his mom still alive? I feel like his mom might be alive.
Yeah. Oh, she is. And she's like vocal, and she's, she loves her children. Yeah. She there was like a magazine piece on her, like I want to say 6 months ago or something. I don't know.
Also wanted to ask you something more important. I should have said this before I hit record, but you shared this on Blue Sky, this article written by Lydia Palgreen, who I think is really interesting and smart and unique. The opinion piece in the New York Times that she has called, "There is no way to live a life without regret." The panic, this is about the panic over transgender children changing their gender through surgery or drugs. And she writes, just around the post, "For a long time, I've been thinking about why we are so terrified a child will regret a gender transition. This essay ended up being not just about gender, but about all of our identities, how they shape us, and crucially, how we shape ourselves." I haven't read it. It sounds fascinating, and I just thought maybe you could say your thoughts on it. If you,
yeah, I don't know her as, a writer or a thinker. I didn't know her until I read this piece, but this piece compelled me to then sort of follow her on social media. I was really moved by it. I found it a really, really interesting piece. I would definitely recommend anyone read it because it helped me a lot in my thinking on identity and gender. It's one of those things where I think a lot of times we get hyper focused on these flashpoints, these things that, especially within politics, the right wants us to like kind of be blinded by this thing they're screaming. And sometimes, we do, or we want to fight back, or we want to get really narrow down on that one point. We really want to we want to meet them where they are.
Or we want to just ignore it because it's not that big of a deal, but we can't. Go ahead.
Yeah. But a lot of times our anger rises to the same level of the passion that they're putting it out. And that is understandable. And I mean, I certainly feel that way quite often. And this was one of those things where it was a very helpful piece to read, to be like, wait a second, what are we actually talking about here? Like, what is at the heart of it? What are we actually talking about? Not on the right in terms of like, what is compelling them to use, trans identity as this rallying cry of hate, but more, what are we talking about when we are even addressing it or thinking it through ourselves? And I found it to be a fantastic piece. And it is much more about this sense of what we allow children to do and what we don't, what expectations we have for a person's identity, for their life, and for what they see as what they regret. And I don't want to like give the whole piece away, so to speak, but she uses this example of, and I think it was some sport. I think it was swimming. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it was.
Where she talks about how she was a really, really good swimmer, and at one point in childhood decided to stop. And if she had continued going with this, she could have potentially gotten scholarships. I mean, she was at that level. There was enough belief that if she really applied herself, she could be a truly top tier swimmer. She could have gotten scholarships, gone to school, had a particular life path. And because she chose this other path where she quit it, she struggled. She ran into other sort of issues and concerns. And so there's a question of like, do you regret that choice that we let a 12-year-old, a 13, a 14-year-old make, which affected the rest of their life? We don't think of those types of choices in that way. And yet we attach so much meaning and weight in terms of gender identity choices. That is like fundamental to, we have to make sure no one regrets anything. And it's something that I grapple with, that I had been thinking about a lot for myself, because I think in my estimation, I was fortunate to grow up prior to social media. And so didn't have that kind of a thing that I had to be concerned with. But I definitely, especially through like middle school, high school, I had lots of questions about gender and sexuality as they related to myself personally. I had no idea how to navigate any of that. I saw all my friends in like 5th and 6th grade being like what you would call boy crazy, right? Like they were very like crushes. They were like, and I didn't feel any of that. And I was very like, I felt nothing. So then for a while I was like, well, does that mean, is it because I don't like boys? Do I like girls? And I was like, yeah, but I don't really feel anything for girls either. So then it was like, there were no other words. So for me, I just was lost in the confusion of it. And like looking back now, what I would say is, I was a late bloomer. I just didn't come to any of that until later into, I was much closer to like 17, 18 or so before I really was like starting to have that sort of strong feelings. I just didn't have them. But if I had been in today's society at the age of 13, 14 going, I don't know, I'm not attracted to any, would I be sitting there playing around with asexual? Like, was that a label that I would want to take on for myself? Maybe. I did not want to become a woman. I was terrified of it. I did not want to like develop. Again, looking back now, I go, well, that's because I didn't want to be an adult. I found adulthood terrifying.
Oh, that's such a fascinating observation, that it was more about maturity and age than it was gender. Huh? Yeah.
I mean, to me, gender was all like attached to adulthood, and all of that seemed frightening as hell to me. But I didn't understand why. And so, if I existed now, would I be looking at like trying to bind my breasts, or having a they them pronouns, or like, because I didn't relate to being a woman. Like that didn't make sense to me. So would I be lost in all those things? I probably would, in the same way that I was then, but there weren't words or communities around it, right? So, where would that have led me? I don't know. Maybe nowhere. Maybe I'd be exactly the same place. But the point is, I might have tried on a lot of hats on the path. And I don't, the idea that in doing that, or in having had that confusion that I couldn't voice at the time, there was no one to voice it to. So this was all internal for me. But if I had expressed this outward and gotten back this like angry push, I don't know what that would have done to me either. But I don't feel like it would have necessarily been helpful or good. I think we have to allow that, like, kids are grappling with all sorts of stuff, and they're going to be trying down a lot of these different paths. And some kids know concretely, this is who I am. And some kids don't, or they don't for a while. And all of these things are okay. We need to treat kids a little more like the adults that they actually are, and they are on the path of becoming.
Oh, man, that was really well said. I'm glad I asked you about that article. You articulated your own experience so well. It's really interesting, and I think everybody probably has a lot of things they can take away from so much of what you just said. But I think my takeaway is that I listened to Lydia Polgreen interview Masha Gessen on Ezra Klein's podcast, and I think that maybe this article was already in the works. But one of the things, so I haven't read it yet, but she said, and it sounds like you're saying, is you said try on a lot of different hats. And you were referring in this conversation to kind of gender and sexual identity. But the truth is, and I think that she also makes this point, we try on a lot of different hats for what sport we like, what music we're into, what our current hairstyle is like, who our friends are, all kinds of career paths. And I have done that my entire life. I've had sex with almost every piece of furniture. I've tried it all. The point being, you can try all kinds of different things. And if we could disentangle that from gender identity and sexual orientation, it would kind of normalize all of that. But a lot of people might simply say, listen, experiment with all the sports you want, but a boy's a boy, a girl's a girl. That's different.
Right. That's exactly right. That's very much the heart of the piece. So definitely I would share that. And I'm glad to hear, Pete, that you have explored your sexuality in this way. And I'm very happy that you were able to, have this consenting relationship with all of the various footstools and nightstands. But I would suggest next time that you also get the consent of the Crate and Barrel manager, because I don't think that he was quite as happy.
Yeah, I was not a Crate and Barrel's an IKEA, and I don't know how you knew that.
I'm sorry, I upgraded you. I put together time, location,
I'm into Swedish
local news stories. I understand.
I'm into Swedish furniture. Oh man, let's see. Well, I'll let you go, I guess, unless there's anything. Oh, I wanted to ask you about the Newsom DeSantis debate, which you didn't watch, which is kind of disappointing because you're literally the funniest, best writer recapping the debates. The Republican debates that we've seen, primary debates. And so I would love to have had your thoughts having seen it. But having heard about it at all, and just having known these two men, Gavin Newsom, who's perfect looking and in his presentation, the bottle politician, a quick-witted, smart, funny, likable guy, versus Ron DeSantis, who is just, speaking of which, trying a lot of different personalities and facial expressions and campaign tactics and campaign managers. He's trying everything. He does not know who he is.
He does not. He does not know I think he does know who he is. He does not know who he's supposed to seem like.
Okay.
I think he knows exactly who he is, but it's just, he knows that is a repulsive thing to others, and he cannot figure out how not to be repulsive to the rest of the world. Which is probably good, because he should be repulsive. He is a repulsive human. I did not watch it. Thank God. That's my main takeaway, is thank God I didn't watch it. It sounds terrible to me. And I would hate, I can't do it. I can't embrace the Newsoming. I appreciate if he, I did hear lots of people saying he did a great job, and he's very good at that sort of thing. And he's very good at commanding the stage and being able to debate and make his opponent look as ridiculous as they are. And I'm so happy that, I'm always happy when that happens, but I would hate to have to triumph Gavin Newsom, because I don't know, that guy, I'm not on board with him.
All right. Well, I mean, you're always skeptical of a clean cut politician in general. I mean, we all are, but I feel like
there's a lot of red flags. If my friend started dating him, I'd be like, all right, but we need to talk about some things right away, because I've got some questions.
I guess the one thing I want to talk about is I'm so much less skeptical on politicians, on Democrats in general, than I used to be, because it feels like we're up against fascism. And I wonder if you've changed the kind of way that things that you allow for, so that as to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, even big issues. And I'm curious, because you tweeted, I did remember one more thing I wanted to ask you, which I thought was really important way of looking at it, connected to what we're talking about with Gavin Newsom. You posted, I should say, on Blue Sky, vote or don't for who you want, but the advice I've found most helpful is to vote for your easier target. You're not picking who you like. You're picking who is even slightly more persuadable. And having spent years yelling at both Trump and Biden, I've only seen Biden move on any of it. I wanted you to unpack that because I think that's kind of what we were talking about as it relates to what I'm saying about less skepticism on the Newsom and other Democrats because of what you just picked up the ball and started writing more eloquently.
Well, I don't have less skepticism. I have a tremendous amount of skepticism. And I also do not trust that just because someone is a Democrat, they will not be drawn towards quite a lot of fascism. So I don't have a sort of like blanket, well, you signed up for this team, so I'm sure you're fine.
Fair enough.
Feeling.
Yes.
I do, obviously I'm going to be more interested. And if I have to just pick based on team, I'll pick a D, but still, that's.
I bet you will.
Yeah, I was waiting on that one.
Right.
You remember before we started recording this when you said you can tell that I want it just by looking at me? You remember that? Yeah. Anyway.
I was talking about, by the way, for everybody, we don't script many things out, and I can tell if I throw out a subject tomorrow, she either wants to talk about it or doesn't, but I did phrase it just as she said. And then I immediately heard myself.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
And she loves D's.
I want the D. You can tell I want it just by looking at me. So the point is, what were we talking about?
I don't know. You calling me out?
Anyway, right. So the point is, I have a tremendous amount of skepticism for basically all basically, if you want to be a politician, I'm skeptical of your basic core. That already gives me a lot of pause. Right. But no, I think that there's so much frustration, and certainly right now, as always, but I would say especially right now, I'm seeing so much frustration on the left with Biden's, especially the way that he has related to the situation in Gaza. There's a lot of outrage and anger, and rightly so. But I think, and I sometimes have a hard time because I'm like, oh, yeah, like, and Biden's not the example for me for that. But there are definitely times where I'm like, I really hate this person and I do not want to vote for them. And I can't believe what am I saying by putting my vote in for them? What is this backing up? Am I supporting a corrupt system? Just, like all that sort of types of thinking go through my head. And so I find this generally to be a very helpful framework. And I first heard it, and I do not know if she got it from somewhere else, but I first heard it from this Philadelphia organizer, Gwen Snyder. She used to say it all the time, and I worked with her on Tax March in 2017, I guess. And she was always, I don't think there was ever a politician that she was very excited about, and I felt similarly, but it was always about, hey, the work doesn't stop because we got some perfect person in office. That's just not going to happen. There's always going to be work that we are going to have to do. So we are not trying to find a perfect person to put in there. And even if we did, the perfect person to me is not the perfect person to you.
Right.
Like, we are not going to be 100% aligned on everything. So regardless of that, there's always going to be work to do. So the question is really not like, is this person great? The question is this person willing to hear anything? And that's the big question. Like, can you reach them in some way? Can you, if you get to the right people, if you get enough people talking to them about this, or are they listening to constituencies? Are they considering what the electorate wants? Are they persuadable in any way? And if you can find someone who is, to me, then it's just a question of like, how persuadable are they and by whom? And so you want to put the person in office that you have the most ability to potentially influence.
And I feel like your point of view on this, specifically the persuadable point, is based on your experience actually lobbying and trying to get elected leaders to do things specifically on tax issues. Like, that's where you're coming from. How much does this person actually care about tax policy, and can I move them at all? I feel like that's coming from your own experience, everything you just said, not like...
Oh, yeah, but I wouldn't limit it to tax policy. Obviously, my job is tax policy, and that's what I do, and I obviously care very much about it, but it's certainly not the only issue that matters to me. So, it's also a question of whether I'm being heard or can be heard on other issues. And there are issues that I, like, for, obviously, maybe not obviously, I should have prefaced it with that, but I feel very strongly about women's healthcare. And
it is obvious.
And I don't work in that space. I have limited time to volunteer. I can make a couple calls, but like I do look to, what are the organizations that are working in that space, and am I electing leaders that are having conversations with those organizations, with those people as well? Are they willing to be heard? I think that's incredibly, incredibly important. And, and I will say, like with Biden, there have been a couple of issues where I have seen public pressure and lobbying has made a difference. He has heard it and he has changed course or moved in a different way. And that is important to me. That's not me saying like, yeah, I love Biden. I don't love Biden. I don't know why I had to say it like that, but I did. but I do think that, of the two, certainly, he's the one I'm going to reach. The only time we've ever reached Trump is he tweeted about a tax march once. And that was it. That's the best we're ever going to get on that. But mostly if we reach him, it's just going to encourage him to like double down and crush whatever gains we might have had to that point.
Love it. Love that perspective. I think it's a really important one, no matter what issues you work on or care about or donate to. How convincible, persuadable is this person that you're electing? And once they're elected, holding them to that and keeping a record of that. Did they actually do anything? Did they move? Did they listen, much less care? And did they move is a great test of sorts. And that's how it should be seen.
Another one I'll point out, there are some senators that are that you can speak to and you can have conversations with and you can understand. But there were movements in multiple points, and I was dealing with quite a lot of like trying to get to Kyrsten Sinema. Who does she listen to? How is she persuadable? She did not give a shit what her constituents wanted. She did not give a shit if people were coming to her office in Arizona, if Arizonans were reaching out. She absolutely ignored them. Then it was like, well, is she listening to donors? Went to nope, she wasn't listening there. She wasn't listening to anyone. I spoke with someone who was talking to the person who cuts her hair. She cut that person out. So there are people who are in office who they just put up walls and they don't give a shit what anyone says. They're going to go with whatever the hell they want to do. And as it turns out, when you have politicians who are making that particular choice, what they want to do almost all the time tends to be whatever financially benefits them the most. So,
specifically on that, financially benefits them. Are you mainly talking about the campaign donations, doing what the donors want them to do so they have enough money to run their next campaign effectively?
Not just that. That's certainly what
certainly they've been benefit
care about that. But some are just looking for their, what's going to benefit my stock portfolio. There's plenty of just direct ways that they can profit.
And also a lot of times people make decisions in office that will get them or guarantee them a job or a consultancy after they leave office. So that's a calculation too. But I do say, I do think there's a lot of Democrats for sure that I've gotten to know that are as close as it gets to being, principally against that kind of influence, knowing that, hey, I'm in the game. I got to play the game. I got to raise $10 million minimum for a house run, probably. So you've got to raise money, and that sucks. That's a shitty thing to have to do, but they're less likely to be personally benefiting from.
I haven't gotten to say this in a while, but I really feel as though one of the number one issues facing us would be campaign finance reform. If we could absolutely change the way that works, we would change the politicians, we would change who we have.
We used to talk about it.
Running. Yep.
We used to talk about it so much more. Lawrence Lessig and his book and his journey, and there was whole movements to change the Constitution. Ever since, I think we're mainly talking about the Citizens United decision, and it used to be a more mutually bipartisan issue. Republicans and Democrats trying for their own interest. They don't want to be out making phone calls and glad handing all the time. No one really likes to do that much less as much as they have to. But they obviously were unable to change that, and now billionaires and millionaires are really running so much of our government because they're influenced because of how much it costs to run a campaign. Be seen.
This is great. It's Sunday. It's leading me right into my workday. Perfect. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Maura, for joining me as always. I'll wrap it up there. You were particularly thoughtful today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there she goes, everybody. I told you it was a good one, right? Anybody disagree, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and send me your phone number, and I will call you and say, what did you not like about that conversation? What was it? What should I have left out? What should I have asked? What should I have done differently? I think Maura is so wonderful, hilarious, brilliant, thoughtful, and thought-provoking, and I really enjoyed hearing her thoughts, and I always love seeing what she's putting up on social media at Blue Sky, still at Twitter and on TikTok and Threads, and of course, always read everything that she's writing. All right, that is it. That's all I've got for you on today, the Monday show. If you're listening on Monday, that's when it dropped, on the 3rd. I hope your December kicks off right and righteously. Speaking of righteousness, we love our friend Jon Carroll, and here he is right now. Go support him, johncarroll.org. Buy this song, pay for it, and pay Jon for his great artistry and work. Thanks so much for listening. Spread the word. Write a review. Talk to you later.
You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt. Down off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down, boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be froze up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.